Imagine stepping backwards through the fog of time, leaving behind the flashing neon lights of the modern world, the hum of smartphones, and the frantic pace of the 21st century. Imagine walking back past the Industrial Age, past the Middle Ages, all the way to a time when the world was vast, silent, and covered in endless forests and untamed rivers. Deep within this quiet, ancient world, a tiny spark catches. A spiral of aromatic smoke rises into the evening air from a small campfire nestled in the mountains of Central Asia. Long before anyone ever rolled a joint, built a glass pipe, or branded a modern dispensary, a human being knelt by a wild green plant, lit it on fire, and breathed in. But when exactly did this relationship begin? Was cannabis always used the way we use it today, or did our ancestors see it as something entirely different? A sacred medicine, a tough fiber for clothing, or a portal to the spirit world? Tonight, we are going to untangle the long, winding, and surprisingly gentle history of humanity's relationship with cannabis. We will travel from the windswept steppes of ancient Asia to the tombs of Egyptian pharaohs, through medieval pharmacies and the secret gardens of the ancient world. This is not a fast-paced tale of modern politics or loud controversies. It is a slow, rhythmic journey through thousands of years of quiet cultivation. By the time we reach the end of our journey, you will see how a simple, resilient we traveled across every continent, subtly weaving itself into the very fabric of human civilization. So, lean back, let the weight of the day fade away, and let's drift back into the calm waters of the past. Our journey begins more than 12,000 years ago, just as the last great ice sheets were retreating from the northern hemisphere. The earth was waking up, and human beings were starting to realize they didn't just have to chase herds of animals, they could settle down and cooperate with the soil. In the fertile, alluvial plains near the Yellow and Yangtze rivers in ancient China, a specific plant began to thrive in the nutrient-rich dirt disturbed by early human settlements. This plant was Cannabis sativa, known to the early Chinese simply as ma. But these ancient communities weren't looking to alter their minds. They were trying to survive, and ma was the ultimate survival tool. To our ancestors, cannabis was first and foremost an incredibly tough, versatile fiber. If you peeled back the outer bark of the stalks, you found long, stringy fibers that were stronger than almost anything else nature provided. Early humans learned to soak these stalks in water, pound them down, and spin them into coarse threads. With these threads, they wove the very first durable fishing nets, allowing coastal and river communities to feed themselves with far less risk. They wove thick, heavy ropes that could pull heavy stones for building, and they crafted rough, burlap-like clothing that protected them from the bitter winter winds. In fact, cannabis fiber was so fundamental to early Chinese civilization that it became one of the 5 grains essential for life. The ancient Chinese used every single part of the plant. They harvested the tiny, nut-like seeds, which were packed with oils and proteins, grinding them into porridge or pressing them for oil during times of famine. For thousands of years, cannabis wasn't a taboo or a luxury, it was a humble, hard-working companion to the daily struggle of human existence. It kept people warm, it kept them fed, and it held their boats together. It was a completely practical relationship, built on utility and respect for a plant that grew rapidly and demanded almost nothing in return. As the centuries slowly drifted by, humans began to look closer at this plant. They noticed that it didn't just provide fiber and food, it had properties that could alter how the human body felt. By the time we reached the year 2700 before the Common Era, we encounter the legendary Emperor Shennong, who is widely regarded as the father of Chinese medicine. Shennong was said to have tested hundreds of wild herbs on himself to discover their healing powers, documenting his findings in the world's earliest pharmacopoeia. Within these ancient medical texts, cannabis transitioned from a simple textile to a revered medicine. The ancient healers realized that when the resinous tops of the female plants were prepared correctly, they possessed a unique power to quiet pain. They prescribed cannabis teas and infusions to soothe the agonizing aches of rheumatism, to calm upset stomachs, and to ease the tremors of nervous disorders. It was viewed as a balancing herb, something that could restore the yin, or the calm, receptive energy of the body, when it was overwhelmed by the fiery, disruptive energy of yang. Meanwhile, further to the west, along the vast, wind-swept grasslands of Central Asia, nomadic tribes known as the Scythians were discovering a more communal, spiritual side to the plant. The Scythians were fierce, horse-riding nomads who lived under the wide-open sky. They didn't build permanent cities or write massive textbooks, but their customs were captured by the Greek historian Herodotus. He described a unique ritual that took place inside small, woolen tents. The Scythians would gather together after a long journey or during a funeral wake. They would bring inside a small, portable bronze brazier filled with glowing red coals, and they would carefully place handfuls of wild cannabis flowers directly onto the heat. As the tent filled with thick, sweet-smelling smoke, the nomads would breathe deeply, sitting together in the enclosed warmth. Herodotus wrote that the smoke made them shout for joy, laughing and weeping together as the tension of their harsh, wandering lives melted away in the dark. For the Scythians, this wasn't an act of rebellion, it was a sacred cleansing ritual, a way to honor the dead and bind the living together through shared breath and quiet reflection under the stars. If we follow the ancient trade routes south, climbing over the rugged, snow-capped peaks of the Hindu Kush mountains, we drop down into the rich, sun-drenched valleys of India. Here, cannabis found a home unlike anywhere else in the world, a place where it was not just tolerated, but actively woven into the highest echelons of spiritual life. In India, the plant became known as ganja or bhang, and it was believed to be a direct gift from the gods, specifically created by Lord Shiva, the deity of transformation, meditation, and time. According to ancient Hindu mythology, Shiva was overwhelmed by the heat and the immense burdens of the cosmos. Seeking relief, he wandered into a field of wild green plants and tasted their nectar. Instantly refreshed and filled with profound peace, Shiva adopted the plant as his favorite food, earning him the title of the Lord of Bhang. Because of this divine connection, cannabis became a central pillar of religious devotion. Millions of pilgrims and wandering holy men, known as sadhus, began using cannabis as an aid to deep meditation. They found that it helped quiet the ceaseless chatter of the analytical mind, allowing them to sit still for hours or days at a time, focusing entirely on the infinite. But it wasn't just for ascetics living in caves. Bhang became a deeply embedded cultural tradition for everyday people, celebrated during vibrant seasonal festivals like Holi, the Festival of Colors. People would grind cannabis leaves into a smooth paste using heavy stones, mixing it with milk, sugar, almonds, and sweet spices like cardamom and saffron. Drinking this cold, creamy beverage was a way to wash away social anxieties, forgive old arguments, and welcome the arrival of spring with an open, joyful heart. The relationship here was entirely open and harmonious. Cannabis was treated with a sense of reverence, viewed as a gentle tool to elevate the spirit, heal the weary body, and bring a touch of the divine down to the earth. As empires rose and fell, the knowledge of this green plant began to travel along the maritime and desert highways of the ancient world. It made its way into the bustling ports of the Mediterranean, where the Greeks and Romans watched it with a mixture of curiosity and practical appreciation. The Romans, ever the master engineers, recognized the supreme value of cannabis for their massive naval fleets. Just like the ancient Chinese thousands of years before them, the Roman Empire needed ropes, sails, and nets that could withstand the corrosive, salty waters of the open ocean. They grew vast quantities of hemp in the fertile fields of modern-day Italy and France, processing it on an industrial scale to fuel their conquests. But the medical mind of the Mediterranean was also taking note. In the 1st century of the Common Era, a Greek physician named Dioscorides traveled with the Roman armies, collecting botanical knowledge from every corner of the known world. In his masterwork, De Materia Medica, he dedicated a page to cannabis, noting that its juice was exceptionally effective for relieving severe earaches and suppressing inflammation. Further south, across the Mediterranean Sea, the ancient Egyptians were integrating cannabis into their sophisticated medical papyri. Archaeologists have discovered references to a plant called shemshamed in texts dating back to the 2nd millennium before the Common Era. Egyptian women used topical applications of the plant to ease the pains of childbirth, while others used it to treat glaucoma and reduce swelling within the body. When the great pharaoh Ramesses II was buried deep within his royal tomb, his embalmers ensured that microscopic traces of cannabis pollen were placed alongside him, guaranteeing that he would have access to its protective, soothing qualities in the eternal afterlife. The plant had become a silent, trusted staple of global medicine, present in the toolkits of physicians from Rome to Alexandria. As the ancient world transitioned into the golden age of Islamic civilization, cannabis entered a new chapter of its history, particularly through a concentrated resinous preparation known as hashish. While Western Europe entered a period of quiet insularity, the cities of Baghdad, Cairo, and Damascus became bustling global centers of science, literature, and philosophy. Because alcohol was strictly forbidden by Islamic law, many turned to hashish as a subtle, alternative way to relax and contemplate the universe. It became especially popular among the Sufis, the mystical, philosophical branch of Islam. The Sufis were poets, dreamers, and seekers who spent their nights singing, dancing, and looking for a direct, ecstatic connection to God. To them, hashish was known as the herb of reflection or the green pearl. They believed that when consumed in moderation, it cleared away the clutter of worldly worries, allowing the soul to perceive the deeper, hidden truths of existence. During the medieval period, travelers walking through the grand markets of Cairo or Damascus would encounter public gardens where poets and philosophers gathered to sip mint tea and share small amounts of hashish. They would spend hours debating the nature of the stars, writing intricate verses of poetry, and listening to the rhythmic splashing of courtyard fountains. It was a time of immense intellectual curiosity, and cannabis was viewed as a gentle companion to the mind, an herb that encouraged patience, introspective thought, and peaceful conversation during the cool desert nights. Eventually, the currents of history carried cannabis across the great Atlantic Ocean, bringing it to the shores of the Americas. In the 17th and 18th centuries, early American colonists were actually required by law to grow hemp. It was considered so vital for the production of ship sails, clothing, and paper that farmers could even use their hemp crops to pay their taxes. Famously, founding figures like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson grew fields of industrial hemp on their plantations, carefully recording the growth habits of the plant in their personal diaries. To them, it was simply an indispensable asset to a growing, self-reliant nation. When we look back across the vast, sweeping landscape of human history, we see that for 99% of our time together, the relationship between humans and cannabis was defined by harmony, utility, and a quiet sense of peace. It was an essential thread in the tapestry of our survival, keeping us warm with its fibers, nourishing us with its seeds, comforting us in times of pain with its medicine, and offering a quiet space for spiritual reflection in an often loud and chaotic world. The anxieties and restrictions of the modern era are just a tiny, recent blip on a timeline that stretches back thousands of years into the ancient mist. Before it was ever a source of debate, it was just a wild, resilient green plant growing quietly on the hillsides of Central Asia, waiting for a human being to stop, look closer, and discover its secrets. And so, as we leave the history books behind and return to the quiet stillness of the present moment, let your mind rest in that same ancient, uncomplicated peace. The world outside will continue its frantic spin, but here, in the quiet dark, you can let go of the day, breathe deeply, and allow yourself to drift into a deep, restful sleep.